My name is Tiffany, Professional Relationship Manager. We're in for a treat. We will be talking about real estate and long term care. And we are joined by some pretty amazing pros. So make yourselves at home and take it away, guys.
All right, everybody. So my name is Dean Graver. I'm with Keller Williams Realty, Team NWE. We're here with our team, Evan Saint-Gerard and Tashana Manram. And Evan, do you want to do a little bit of an introduction? Then I'm going to go and say, state why we're here a little bit too.
Sure. As Dina mentioned, I'm Evan Saint-Gerard with Keller Williams Realty Landmark, real estate agent. I'm going to let Tashana introduce herself as well.
Hey everyone, my name is Tashana Manram and I work with Dean and Evans, providing excellent service to everyone and anything real estate related.
Okay, and one of the reasons I'm glad everybody is here, Andrew and Tiffany, and thank you for helping put this together. One of the reasons that we do this is because I know that we sell real estate, but there's so much more than just somebody buying a house. It goes a lot deeper than that, and we want to make your experience with the whole entire home buying, home ownership process something that's beneficial for you, that's comfortable for you, that's understandable and clear for you. And to do that, we ask our customers and clients a lot of questions to get to know you as well as we can. So, okay, so we ask a lot of questions when we're interviewing with clients to go to work for them and excuse me, and to help them out. And we ask questions because the more that we know about them, not just the house they want, the 3-bedroom colonial with the whatever it is, but everything that's going on around them, because there's so many unknown circumstances and unseen circumstances that can get in the way of their dream of what they're doing, whether they're buying, selling, moving, investing, whatever they're doing. So much of our job is protecting you from what happens during the process. And it's just very interesting because there's so many things that can get involved with who owns the house, especially in a family. If somebody passes away, how do you protect your assets? How are you sure that you're the rightful person selling the house without anyone else stepping in or causing any grief? And also, if somebody is sick or they're older or they're on Medicaid, there are Medicaid liens that come, all kinds of circumstances going on. Again, it's that unforeseen stuff that we get from learning and meeting, you and finding out as much as we possibly can. And that's basically what we're looking to do now. This is about real estate planning and elder law, which is what Andrew does, but it's also long-term care, and these two intersect greatly, especially with real estate. And that's why we're here. And I want to introduce Andrew Geloza and let him explain what I mean when I say that these intersect. You're muted, Andrew.
You're muted, Andrew.
Muted.
What else can go differently?
Here we go. Now you're not. Now you can.
Hi, I'm Andrew Geloza from the Estate Planning and Elder Law Group, and we are estate planning and elder law attorneys. What that means is that's what we specialize in. We also have done a lot of real estate transactions throughout our life, both as being a real estate attorney at some time, in the 35 years I've been practicing, and as well as for people who have estates, who have houses. That's kind of what most people have. You have a house, you have some retirement accounts, you have some bank accounts. That's what is the basics for most people's estate plan. And as Dean said, the intersection of where estate planning / elder law meets real estate happens quite often when you're talking about what happens when people have to face the fact that they need long-term care. And there's two ways people deal with it. They deal with it, they wait till there's a problem and they need it, and then we figure out what happens, which there's always a plan that we can do. However, it's usually much more expensive, it's much more frustrating, it's much more emotional doing it that way, or people actually plan in advance, because planning in advance gives you certain advantages. I think that we're going to approach this topic tonight from a couple of different angles. One of those angles is pre-planning. Why do you want to pre-plan? Why is it important to do that? Another angle we're going to deal with is you're now getting a house that belonged to somebody else because they passed away and passed it on to you. Well, many people, surprise to everyone, get a notice that they have a lien on that house. sometime during the life of the person who passed, they were given some benefits by the government, and now the government is looking to get repaid. So that's a Medicaid lien that happens quite often as well. And there are other times when real estate meets estate planning, when we talk about people who try to do any kind of estate planning, they don't think they need it, or they have this idea that just transferring the house to someone else gets it out of their name and takes care of everything. Those cause a whole bunch of different problems. And I think that tonight, we're going to talk about a couple of those scenarios so that you can get an understanding about it. I think everybody on this screen has dealt with this issue in one way, shape, or form. So we're going to talk to you about that stuff. So why do we need to pre-plan for long-term care? We need to pre-plan because that either, well, I'll tell you why we need to pre-plan. Long-term care is extraordinarily expensive. A nursing home costs somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000 per month. Care at home costs somewhere between $9,000 and $20,000 per month. That is a phenomenal amount of money. At $15,000 a month, that's $180,000 a year. How many are listening here today have that kind of money to spend down and still have any wealth to give away if the average nursing home stay is 3 to 5 years? You're talking about nearly $1 million in 3 to 5 years. In 5 years, you will have spent nearly $1 million on your care if you spend it, if you have to pay it out of your pocket. And what do we do to avoid that? You have to have the ability to get Medicaid in order to cover your long-term care costs, because Medicare doesn't do it. People think they have Medicare, they're fine. No, Medicare is health insurance for people over 65. So what is the only payer for long-term care? That is Medicaid. And you will be surprised that even though you may have assets that you think disqualify you because you have too much money, there really is nearly never too much money if you plan in advance. And that's the kind of thing that we talk about. Get yourself ready, plan in advance, and you can take advantage of the laws that exist. So for instance, think about Amazon. Everybody knows Amazon, right? Amazon made $19 billion in profit in 2019. How much taxes did Amazon pay?
Zero.
Close. Amazon made money. The government owed them tax credits the way they did their business. So not only didn't they pay any taxes, they were given credits to use towards future years, because that's what the laws and the rules said, that if you do your business this way, that way, or the other way, you are entitled to these credits. Similarly speaking, you can be entitled to get Medicaid despite the fact that you have houses and you have money, but you have to act in advance and take advantage of the laws and the rules that exist in order to do that. So that's just one aspect of planning. Planning in advance always, like, I'm sure that everyone here has had a circumstance in their life where they have gotten that they know the difference between what happens if they had thought about it in advance, made a plan, and carried it through, versus waiting to see whatever happens and see how it works out.
Can I just interject for 1 second?
Please.
There's never a day in my real estate career that I don't have a family that's in our pipeline of business that doesn't have an estate problem. Never. And I mean, we talk to everybody, but something always comes up. I'm not saying with everybody. I'm just saying of all the clients that we have on any given Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, somebody is getting surprised with something family-wise, either incoming or outgoing, but something. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, it's true, because it really is a fact. Sometimes it's as simple as the fact that there is people who are in the chain of title that weren't really properly addressed somewhere. You have those kind of situations. The surrogates court is filled with all the stories that happen when people don't do proper planning, because again, the failure to plan is really a plan to fail, right? So it makes sense to contact someone like us when you either own real estate, want to own real estate, other family members do own real estate. It makes sense to at least have a conversation, or at least get the information you need, because how many people took estate planning in high school? How many people got any kind of understanding about this thing when from your family, you sit down around the table and get lessons from dad about, estate planning. It usually doesn't happen. And most people don't really understand that there are consequences to everything we do, right? Like when you transfer the house to family members and then people die, it creates a whole new bunch of other people who are part of the ownership of that house.
I want to, can I just say one quick scenario? Does that happen also?
Please do, because let's talk about your scenario. I'll talk about mine.
All right. Evans, 40 Ronald Place. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. X are married. Mr. X passes away 20 years ago. They bought this house 40 years ago. Mr. X passes away 20 years ago. Mrs. X is now in a nursing home and she wants to sell the house. It just turned out that they were always called Mr. and Mrs. X, but they were never legally married. So she figured that when he passed away, the house went to her. It did, but the other half, his half, because they both owned the house, all of his family from South Carolina and North Carolina came out of the woodworks. Evans and I were with the lawyer we spent 2 years trying to untangle this till finally the Medicaid liens piled up and nobody could pay anything. And this home was lost in a foreclosure. And an investor bought it, and I don't know what he did with it. No one, you know what I mean? It just fell through all the cracks it can fall through because people didn't look closely at the other side, at certain things.
It's kind of like what you said.
That there was going to be a problem early on, but it was already, all right, well, we're already in this, so it wasn't like you can go back 20 years.
It's kind of like what you said before. It's pretty much when you don't plan, situations like this happen. Had they took the time, talked to the right professionals, got the right paperwork, the family would have got something, at least something, basically, and not leave empty-handed.
Right. I mean, I have a situation where the last deed of record is 1908.
Oh my God.
Deed before that was 1893. And there are 38 people that they know of at this moment who are potential distributees of the original 7 children of the woman who owned it. You know, that's a law school problem. That's what that is. And what happened is no one in all of these years ever thought to file a new deed to correct the title in any kind of way. And now they have this jumble of spaghetti that causes big problems. So that idea about the Medicaid lien often comes also when there's a mortgage on the property. Sometimes you have a mortgage and a Medicaid lien, and then you have no equity left in the house. The family gets nothing because of non-planning, right? Or you have a situation where we had one today that came in. There was a husband, wife, and older son owned the house. Older son is now disabled, and they had 3 of them transferred the house to their 5 siblings. And now you have a whole bunch of different people who have a different idea of whose house it is and how it's going to work and what they're going to do, because now the son needs to get some long-term care. So as Evans is saying, if anybody has any questions, we'll be happy to answer it. And Shoshana, do you have any scenarios for us? You're muted.
Unmute. So that's exactly one thing that I want to ask, right? If you have a property placed in a trust, and then you have your Medicaid liens, right? And a mortgage, which one is going to be covered first? And is the heirs covered also? How does that work?
That's a great question. So number one, in the state of New York, you have a mortgage. While you can protect it against Medicaid, you can't protect it against your mortgage. So putting the house into the trust does not affect the fact that you have a mortgage. The Medicaid lien actually is probably a priority lien according to federal law. But if you planned in advance before any lien attaches, before Medicaid has given any benefits, and you pass that house into your trust before the look-back period, then you're protected against anything that happens going forward. So for instance, You put your house in trust today, June 1st, 2023. In 6 years from now, you go apply for Medicaid. That house is not a countable resource anymore because it's outside the 5-year look back for skilled nursing facility Medicaid. And so you qualify for Medicaid. All that time, if anything happened, say you incurred debt during that time and didn't pay it, and the judgment issues, that judgment creditor cannot get the house because the house was in the trust before the claim arose. So you cannot protect in New York against existing claims and creditors. So like if you have credit card debt and you put your property into this house, you cannot protect against those debts that you already have when you create the trust. So there is limitations, but the limitations are diminished the sooner you do your planning, right? Most people over 65, the statistic is about 70% of all people over 65 need some long-term care. So you have a choice. Take a chance that you're in the 30% and will not have to pay long-term care of those numbers that we're talking about, $15,000 to $20,000 per month, or do some planning. You create the look-back period yourself by starting early, and then once that you've gone through the period that they can look back, then you have peace of mind going forward. Anything that happens after that will not create a lien against your house. So it makes sense. That's why pre-planning just really, really makes sense. So that's one of the things that we see all the time is people, that people fail to plan and end up with a much more expensive result than had they spent the money, taken the time to do the planning. Also, people think that, the good idea, like we said before, transferring houses to other people while you're alive also creates great tax differences, right? The family we're talking about just before, when you transfer the property to someone 100%, they take on your cost basis. So I would assume that everybody who's listening here would, in addition to passing on the property to their family when they die, would also like to pass it on with them having to pay the least amount of tax possible. I'll assume that's correct, right? So when you transfer a piece of property as a gift, that means you're not selling it, like say you transfer it to your children to get it out of your name, and you don't reserve a life estate, you then transfer over that house at your cost basis, what you bought it for, plus whatever improvements you made up to date. So let's say you buy a house for $100,000. And let's say you own it for 25 years, and it's now worth $1 million. And over those 25 years, you put in $200,000 of improvements, and there are other costs of sale and everything of another 100. So your cost basis is $400,000. If you sold the house, you would pay tax on $600,000. That's 25 to 35% of that $600,000. If you transfer that house to your child outright, without reserving any kind of interest, you now transfer over to them your cost basis. So when you die, the value of the house does not step up to the date of death value. They take on the carryover basis of $400,000. Now they get this house, sell the house for $1 million, they're paying the tax. If you didn't do it that way, if you use some trust planning or did some other kind of planning that you reserved at least some interest and pass on that property when you die, your children, your family, whoever you passed it to, now would own the house at $1 million, sell it at $1 million, there would be no tax to pay.
So the government is just out on that?
Yeah, yes, the government is out on that. That is one of the last good things for everybody in the tax code. The tax code is a great thing for people who are really wealthy and have really keen attorneys and understand how to play that tax game, right? There are loopholes, exceptions, and exclusions.
It just seems like the people that, like you said, it's not that they're wealthy, they pay less taxes. It's just that they're wealthy, they did their homework on this.
And that's what I'm saying. So similarly speaking, we'll bring that conversation back to long-term care again, right? If you know that you need to plan in advance and you know somebody who knows how to do that for you, why wouldn't you take advantage of that to make sure that when you pass on your house, it's not going to be, you're not going to worry that the state of New York has to be paid before your kids get anything, right? And that's what pre-planning is all about. It also makes it so that you know that you're going to have coverage. You're going to have benefits that you've already paid for. Everybody is paying as part of their taxes. They're paying into Medicaid and Medicare. It's going in. You're already paying into the system for years and years and years. But if you have more than $30,000 as an individual and more than like $170,000 as a married couple, you don't qualify for Medicaid. $30,000 is not a lot of money in our world. So if you have more than $30,000, you're not going to get Medicaid. You need to figure out how you're paying for your long-term care. And if you have a house, that's the main target.
Andrew,
So-
could you walk us through the process? Let's say whoever's watching this right now, whether they're watching it now or they're watching it later when we send them the recording, they want to start with the long-term care, basically. How do they start? What's the process like?
Well, the process is like this. One of the things I suggest is, go on my website, come to one of my workshops that I do. I do 2 workshops a month on estate planning and Medicaid planning, because it's a good idea for you to understand what it is we're going through. So there's a whole vocabulary to it as well. So it's a good idea to get educated, or call my office and we'll make an appointment for you. So we'll make an appointment, you'll come in and we'll explain it to you. Really what you need to know is you need to understand that you're best off beginning the planning when you're still married, when you still have a married couple, because you can now plan for both of you. Because when one of you dies, now you have a single person and they have less loopholes and there's less exclusion there than when you have with a single person. So the idea is, when it's important to you that you're concerned about it. Some people it's their 60s, some people they're 70, some people are 50. And if you have a family history that everybody goes before, in the 60s, then maybe you're a 50s person who should think about planning. Because what planning does is it ensures that these things that you worked so hard to get are going to go where you want them, to your family. And they're going to go without being cut up into little pieces by all the money that's going to be owed for long-term care. So come and get some advice. If you think this applies to you, come and get some advice from somebody like us who will help you, walk you through what has to be done. And basically what has to be done is we have to find out what is important to you. When we find out what's important to you, we then design a plan for that. You come in, we have several meetings where you tell us what's going on with you, give us some financial information about you, because everyone is different depending upon the types of assets you have and the amount of assets you have. There's different types of things that have to be done. Once we have a good idea of who you are and what you have, we talk about what you want to accomplish. And then we give you a plan that's going to accomplish that by getting the information from you, drafting these documents, and giving you something. We then help fund it into your trust. You can create the greatest trust in the world, but if you don't put your property in, now you have a trust that's doing absolutely nothing. And I can't tell you how many times people have come to my office very proudly showing me the trust they have, but there's nothing in it because nothing was put in it. A lot of people who don't, or are not attorneys and don't do trust that often, I don't know who and why they would do it, but there's at least a half a dozen times I've seen it where people come into my office, there's absolutely nothing in their trust. So your trust is doing absolutely nothing. So it's important you choose the right people who you're gonna put in charge. You create the rule book to say what happens to you. It talks about what happens if you get sick. It passes on power without having to go through any kind of court system. The state of New York stays out of your family's life. That's why it makes sense to do pre-planning, because it saves you lots of money in the long run, saves you a lot of anxiety, and it prevents that thing of that Medicaid lien being attached even when you get benefits. So kind of that's what.
Is there a benefit to doing like long-term care earlier, like if you're 40 years old, or is it like insurance or anything like that, where if you have it for a long time, maybe there's some benefit on the other side that grows? Anything?
Well, that's a good question, and you mentioned long-term care and insurance in the same sentence, so I'll say this. Long-term care insurance is a good thing to have. It is, and it's easier and cheaper to get when you're younger. So it makes sense to create that for yourself. In addition, really the planning is up to you when it's important to you, right? There's going to be some restrictions. You don't get benefits like you get by doing the planning without having some cost to it, right? But the cost is minimum compared to what the benefits that you receive are. So the cost to creating a Medicaid trust plan means that once you protect the property, you don't have the right to take it directly back to yourself. So you have this house, you plan on living in it. If you want to sell it, you can sell it, and you can buy replacement property. But the properties will stay in, and the proceeds will generally stay in that trust because that's what you want to protect. So the property you're protecting, you're giving up the right to. Nobody comes to me in their 40s, 50s, 60s and puts everything into a trust, right? It doesn't make any sense. You need money to live off of. So we produce a plan for them based upon whatever it is important to them, whatever their assets look like, and their age appropriate decisions and what they want. You're the one who makes all the decisions. We just help to guide you, to leave you in a place where you protect it as much as you can. Usually the real estate, that's why people come to us, to protect the houses that they have for some time, that have appreciated. That's really the mainstay of their estate. We protect that house and leave them with their assets to live off of, because everybody's they want to have the same quality of life before and after doing planning. And that happens with someone like us who helps you do the planning. Documents are great, but it's really about having a plan that integrates those documents into the lifestyle that you want.
So this is where it comes in, like with the revocable trust, the irrevocable trust, and the living trust.
Well, living trusts are trusts you create while alive, and there are revocable ones and irrevocable ones. Many people start off in their younger years doing revocable trusts because they want to make sure that when they pass, if they pass when they're young especially, that they're appointing everything that's going to happen, all the people who will take over, and they don't have to go into court to get they don't have to get into court to get the court's approval. We've talked about it before. When you have a will, that will must go through probate, meaning it must go through a court process in order for your executor, the person you name in the will, to gather your stuff and give it out to your beneficiaries. They need to get the approval from the court at all different levels. So basically, the government is involved in your family's life, sometimes for multiple years. I've seen probates go on for 4 or 5 years. Do you want your family waiting to get the distributions out of your estate, get the money and the property that you're leaving them, and have to wait months and months or years and years? Using trust planning avoids that. A revocable trust will avoid that probate part. A revocable trust cannot provide the asset protection needed to do planning for Medicaid, because the revocable trust, everything that's in there, you have the benefit of when you create it. You have the ability to change everything and amend anything. It's very flexible, but you don't get any asset protection. So Medicaid looks at whatever's in your trust as available to be spent down for your care. And that's why we need to use an irrevocable trust. Right? The irrevocable trust allows a separation enough between you and your property that Medicaid recognizes that it's not directly available to you, and therefore doesn't count those assets against you, subject to that look back period. A lot of words.
So if you have something for like your family members and it's an irrevocable trust, what happens if something goes south 15 years from now? And
You mean something happens and you need to get access to the money that you protected, or?
The family member no longer speaking.
yeah, I'm thinking of that.
Yeah, well, the family members no longer speaking really it depends. So how a trust is set up, you generally want to be the trustee of your own trust, and you can be the trustee of your irrevocable trust and still have asset protection. I want you to know that you can do that. We do it all the time. You
Okay.
can do that. It's not like you have to let your kids control your house in case the kids start fighting with each other, and then it creates a
Exactly.
problem for you.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't have to be that way. It is that way quite frequently. Many, many, many lawyers do it that way. The real truth is, as long as Medicaid still recognizes that the fact that you're the trustee doesn't give you any powers to do anything that someone who's not you can do, they recognize it here in New York. So you can be the trustee of your own trust and get Medicaid. You can be the trustee of your own trust and still have asset protection. So my point is, we use a trust that's mostly more flexible than most to give them the benefits they're looking for, yet also make sure that they're qualified for Medicaid. So you create this trust with the rules that say you still have the right to change trustees. You have the right to change the beneficiaries. If your kids really piss you off, you just reduce their percentages or just cut them out altogether, because you reserve the right to do that. It's because the type of trust we're using, most of the people that we deal with have estates that are below the estate tax level, right? So in New York State, you only have to pay estate tax if you have more than $6 million. If you have more than $6 million, you need to plan for that to make sure that you're not paying estate tax. If you don't, then we can use a more flexible trust, almost like a revocable trust in a lot of ways, to give you the power and authority to make the significant changes if you ever need to, because the circumstances of your family change. So it's not written in stone. And here's another secret here in New York. You can revoke an irrevocable trust either partially or fully. So there ever, like say you had two houses and the planning went awry and you needed to take one of the houses out and sell it and use the proceeds outside, you can do that. We also have other planning principles in our plans that allow you to get access to your property. So if you have money sitting in your irrevocable trust and you don't have direct access, we will give you indirect access to it through your trusted beneficiaries. It's really kind of remarkable how flexible the planning can be and yet still be effective to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, giving the government as little money as possible. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because I mean, we're not evading anything. We're just making sure that you have to spend the least amount possible to get your care, or the least amount possible for your taxes, or the least amount possible for all the different other considerations, because we have laws and rules that affect everybody, and it only will apply to and be implemented by the people who know how to use them.
Andrew, I have a question for you. This is regarding, we have a lot of clientele that have family members. They spread out, they go to different states and whatnot. Let's say that the family members move to another state. Are the laws in that state going to be the common as the ones here in New York?
For the most part, our trust will work in all 50 states because trust drafted in the other states will work in our state. That's how the United States work. You know, each state may have some different rules and regulations, but like my New York trust will be determined according to New York rule when it comes time to determine what's supposed to happen. So like you'll see somebody moves down to Florida, they have a New York will or a New York trust, they die in Florida. The court's going to apply the New York law to that trust when interpreting it. It doesn't invalidate it by being there. It doesn't change the fact that that you have these benefits. Now, Medicaid, on the other hand, works differently in different states. Will it always work exactly the same way? Probably not. Medicaid is a joint program between the state government and federal government, and some states are more restrictive and some states are less restrictive.
All right, I want to open it up to the audience right now. So if you have any questions about anything, there's a Q&A button on the bottom. Feel free to click on that and put your questions in there. You can also raise your hand. There's a raise your hand button on the bottom as well. So click on that and then we'll answer your questions. But Andrew, feel free. What's the most common misconception that people have right now about this subject?
Most people think that the most common misconception, believe it or not, is Most people think that if they do estate planning, they're gonna die. I mean, it's superstition, really. I mean, it sounds very funny, but people are culturally and or individually are very superstitious. That's one part. The other part is people don't talk to their families about money. You know, it's like a taboo subject. You know, they don't want, you know, like it's not polite to ask your parents about their planning or something. And it just boggles my mind how that possibly can be when it's probably, you know, probably one of the most important conversations you can ever have in your life with your family about what kind of planning are we doing. Considering the statistics, 70% of all people over 65 need long-term care. And of the 70% that need long-term care, 40% of those are between 35 and 65. The statistics show it's not just an old people's problem. People get sick and need long-term care. Anything that lasts more than 100 days is long-term. I mean, some things like Lyme disease could be a long-term care issue. You know, you get bitten by a tick and you, for the rest of your life, you may be sick. Or you're
That's
having
the
Crohn's
reason why
disease.
Evans doesn't want to go hiking with us. But Andrew, so some
We have
people
no answer to that.
some people may be under the misconception that you can only put a property in a trust. What are some other things that you can put into a trust?
Life insurance policies, certificates of deposit, bank accounts, you know, stock brokerage accounts, you know, savings bonds. You know, you can put personal property in there, which we do technically, but some people say, should I put my car into the trust? I think that's a pretty foolish idea. A car is something that has like inherent vice, they call it. Inherent vice means that the thing causes problems. Like you hit somebody and kill them with your car, and the car is owned by the same trust that your accounts are owned, not a good idea. So most of your personal property can go into the trust in a symbolic way, at least, because there's no title piece that we assign the property to the trust. But all the other, you know, you can open up bank accounts, or you can make your trust your beneficiary of, say, a retirement account. And therefore, you can do planning to help protect your children either from themselves or from other people coming to affect them negatively. Like you want to make sure that if your daughter marries, you know, Harry doesn't leave, take divorce and take half of her money, half the money you gave her. You can protect against that. So that's why, like a lot of times, financial advisors, we were talking about this before, you know, Shoshana asked the question, do we see more people thinking about this and wanting to do trust planning? And the answer is yes, because all the misconceptions about trust planning or whatever from the financial community especially is starting to be dispelled, and they're starting to be more advocates for trust planning. Because it used to be you go to your financial advisor, oh, you don't need a trust. You just beneficiary designate everything, make co-owners of things, and you avoid probate. Yes, you avoid probate. But what if you don't want to give you give your son $10 and he spends $100? You know, do you want to do some planning, or do you want to give him $100,000 from your estate and just give it to him outright and let him do whatever he wants with it? More likely than not, that's not a good idea, right? So how do you get around that? You can't if you give him a bank account, name him the beneficiary, he gets 100% of it when you die. So then you use your trust to say the money is either in my trust or going to go into my trust and come out into a trust for my son, and my daughter is going to be the trustee, and he can get 20% at this age, or 30 more percent at this age, the rest of it when he hits 65, or whatever rules you want to create. But if you don't create the box, what the trust is, it's the box you create. If you create a box, you can then control the box. If you just beneficiary designate everything, they're going to get everything outright. Like what happens if you have a child who has a gambling problem that you really don't know about, or a drug problem that you don't know about, right? That's those kind of things. Or again, concerned that if your daughter gets divorced or your son gets divorced, their soon to be ex-spouse is going to get a piece of your money, right? You can protect, but you have to do it in advance because that's the only way it works. Or the other one I like is the remarriage protection. Remarriage protection is not stopping your spouse from getting remarried after you die. That's not what remarriage protection is. But what remarriage protection is, you know, you get married, you put together some assets together, you work hard, you create a family, and now you have this stuff. And the general plan is we spend whatever we're going to spend during our lifetimes, and when we die, it's going to go to our kids, right? Everybody kind of plans that way. A lot of times what happens, though, is spouse number one dies, and spouse number two, the surviving spouse, meets Bob, the pool guy, or meets some other person who catches their eye, right? And all of a sudden, they're the best person in the whole world. And guess what happens to that plan that my kids get all my money, or all of mine and my ex-deceased wife's money? There you go, flying out the window. Because if you don't do planning at the time, you lose the opportunity. And I had this situation. I had a 78-year-old wife and an 81-year-old husband come in to talk to me about planning. And we talked about this thing, about what we can do. And, you know, like she said, oh, we're so old. We've been married for 40-something years. We know who's going to marry us. What? And then I reminded them of the story I tell in my workshops about Bob, the pool guy. You know, I'm dead. My wife gets remarried to Bob, the pool guy. Or the real life story of Anna Nicole Smith and the 24-year-old Playboy bunny and the 90-something-year-old billionaire, right? And so she says, you know what? I think we should do it. The husband was so tired of hearing me talk about it, he would have said yes to anything at that point. So he said, yeah, sure, let's do it. So we do it. We do the planning. Well, 3 years later, he comes to the office. He's now 84 years old. And he brings his 42-year-old new wife with him because the other one died 6 months ago. And what he wants to do is he wants to make sure she gets everything. Well, I was very happily, I was happily in the position to tell him that we couldn't do that because we did this planning when it was available to be done. You agreed with it. And now your kids are going to get the part that they're supposed to get because that's how the planning works. So planning is possible if you do it in advance. You can't really plan backwards. So that's why it makes sense with long-term care issues and with other issues that you plan early rather than wait for the last minute. Because it's like trying to pick the height of the real estate market or the bottom of the stock market. It's not going to happen. You're going to usually miss that landmark. And what's going to happen is the consequences are going to be very costly and very painful. We have some questions.
Have a couple questions. Yes.
We have a question from Nicole Young. Is disability insurance the same as long-term care insurance? And then she had a part B to that question. Once you put the real estate into a trust, do you have to update the insurance and mortgage company? So I guess we should do the first one first.
I'll answer the first. No, they're different. Disability insurance is your inability to work. Long-term care insurance is, or planning for long-term care is planning for, say, nursing home and or at-home care that lasts more than 100 days for a chronic or, a chronic situation. And so they're very different. Long-term care insurance is different than disability insurance because long-term care goes into effect when you have some kind of catastrophic thing and has nothing to do with the fact that you can't work. Disability insurance is that you're not able to work and you purchased insurance to make sure that you have a stream of income coming in while you're disabled. If you put the house in the trust, we always suggest that you make your trust an additional insured on your homeowner's policy because we all kind of had some experience. Most of us have had experience with insurance companies. Their job is to try not to pay claims. They like collecting your premiums, but when you have a claim to make, they got 2,700 people who call up to say no. That's what their job is. They say no, right? All of a sudden you paid in all your whole life and now you need some of the money back because something happened and they say no. Well, one of the things they would try to say no to is if you don't name your trustee insured and the trust is the owner and not you individually, they will try to avoid paying a claim. So we make sure in our process that we remind you to go do that. So we tell you when we sign the deed to put your house in the trust, and we remind you, go there within 2 weeks, call your insurance agent, name the trust as additional insured, and then we also follow up with them to make sure they did it, because it's important. As far as the mortgage is concerned, most mortgages are not affected by the transfer to your trust. There's federal law that provides that that due on sale clause that's in a mortgage does not apply when you are still the owner and you have the beneficial interest and you transfer it to a trust. So you don't have to tell the mortgage company anything really. Next question.
I think that's it for questions, and that's it for me.
Come on.
Keep on going, guys.
If you guys have any questions, feel free to hit us up right now. We're doing this live. Feel free to raise your hand on the button on the bottom or hit the Q&A question button and ask us your questions. We're here to answer your questions. So any other questions right now?
And also, there is a lot of information out there, right? There's a lot of places that you can go out there and get information. The problem is trying to assimilate it in a way that makes sense to you, right? There's a whole bunch of fear, especially about long-term care and Medicaid. All of us, well, at least most of us have had some experience where some family member, some friend of the family, something has happened where someone has gotten sick and then the family lost the house. It's a horrible story.
And what do you tell people when their financial planners tell them you don't need a trust?
Well, I say, can I speak to your financial planner is probably the first thing. And the second thing I also express to them that, you know, your financial planner knows a lot of things. And I'm not saying he doesn't have your best interest at heart, but when your financial planner, and here's a great one, okay? We're doing planning for a couple. They have a lovely house up in Westchester. They have, you know, retirement accounts. They both worked in, you know, in social work and long-term career as therapists. They had a bunch of money in a beautiful house. They have money with a financial advisor. And now the husband is deteriorating relatively rapidly, and they're literally spending $10,000 to $14,000 per month of people coming into the house to help take care of him. And they said, what can we do? Well, we can plan for Medicaid. You have all these assets, though, and we're going to have to move some around into the trust, or we're going to have to move it away from the person we're applying for. And so we make that plan, and we call the financial advisor, and the financial advisor's assistant is giving us a hard time to say, why do they need to do planning? They're never going to spend through the $2 million they have. Like, what's in her business, how much money that they want to spend or not, right? So I then contacted her supervisor, and all of a sudden she turned very different in the way that she spoke about all that stuff. Because bottom line is that I'm not in the moral business of thinking whether Medicaid, getting Medicaid is morally right or morally wrong. I do know this. They take your tax money every single month. They don't really care about that. There's no morals to that. And after you've paid in all this time, just because you don't know how to do it, you've got to not get benefits that you otherwise would be entitled to. I think that, I mean, it goes to show you only large companies and very rich people should be able to do that. I think everybody who's sitting there with a house and, you know, a few $1,000s in the bank, because they're not really rich. They're a millionaire because they have $1 million house, but they're not millionaires because they don't have cash. They don't feel like millionaires, right? Should they have their house be in danger because they don't know how to do this? Or they don't want, I mean, their financial advisor says they shouldn't take advantage of this for some crazy reason. Like, why is it their business what they want to do? So we try to explain to them this whole scenario, right? This is plain English, you know. If you know how to do it, you get a chance to do it. If you don't know how to do it, it's understandable why you wouldn't. But once you know how to do it, how can you not do it, right? Do you want to spend down $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 before, you know, you either die or then get Medicaid? Is that something that you'd want to do? I don't think that their clients would want to do that. So, as you can tell, I'm a little passionate about that subject.
Well, we see that, we hear that as well. I have a question.
We're here to help the regular plain folks
Gotcha.
get what they're entitled to.
Speaking of which, we got a couple questions coming in. I had a question, someone just texted me right now because they know that we're doing this. They had a question regarding reverse mortgages and planning. How does that work? Can you do both?
Yes. So the good news is that basically we work together kind of with reverse mortgage lenders and things, or co-ops. You know, co-ops is another interesting ownership vehicle here in our city. You know, both of which have, you know, obviously have a big interest in the property and in the financial aspect of the property. So you have to work along with them. So we work along with reverse mortgage companies. Sometimes, most of the time, they need us to tweak our documents somewhat to allow for the reverse mortgage and how it works with, you know, the person, the property, the money, et cetera. And co-ops too. Co-ops, you know, like, you know, every co-op is like a small kingdom, right? Everybody has a king and a whole court of jesters and everything else. And basically they make the rules and you have to follow their rules. So you'd be surprised that some of the ones that have no problem at all with doing trust planning and the ones that do have trust planning, that make no sense. So but we also work along with them. There is flexibility within what we do to make it work in those kind of circumstances.
I think the ultimate thing is you have to sit down with the professional, ask these questions to the professional, and they'll guide you basically what the right plan will be for you and your specific family and your needs.
Exactly. It's like going to buy a house. Is every house perfect for everybody?
No.
No, right? You guys know that. So, you know, they come to you because you're the experts at that. I'm sure that you're not the type of realtors that you're going to try to sell this house to Mr. Jones because you're going to make a big commission, but it's really not right for Mr. Jones.
At the end of the day, it has to be right for Mr. Jones, Mrs. Jones, the family, the whole family. It has to be right for them, whatever their particular plans are. And our goal, just like your goal, is we want to have referral clients that are always referring us.
Okay.
So if they're not happy, they're not referring.
Absolutely.
I have 2 more questions, Evans.
Yes, I see that. All right, so Tiff, you want to take these ones? These are from Nicole.
Yeah, I'll take them away. So from Nicole Young, what is the range of cost of creating a trust? Was the first question.
A good question. So there are different types of trusts that we talked about before. You have, I mean, so the range is really somewhere between 4,500 and what we're talking about is for a plan. It's not just one document called a trust. It's all of the documents you need so that while you're alive, if something happens to you and it's not in the trust, you have coverage, or what happens in the trust and you have coverage. So we have plans that start at 4,500, go all the way to, you know, the basic type of planning, no fancy tax planning and other things. So 4,500 to 9,500 is basically the range of our plans.
Okay, the next question is, how do you handle if a lawsuit is in process and there's an irrevocable trust while the person has Medicaid?
Well, there's a lot of pieces to that question. So
yeah.
The problem with that question is it really depends on the timing of everything about what applies and what doesn't apply. It's not that you can't answer that question. It's like saying, how long is a rope? Right?
All right, so you're going to need more information in order to answer that question. So
There's
Nicole,
a specific question, they can call in and like you can give them 15 minutes to figure out if there's a situation we can help them with.
All right. Any other questions from our audience? Because we're about 1 more minute left from our panelists.
Like y'all should start saying your loves and goodbyes and
yeah.
For next week.
I don't even know how to touch that one. You want to lead the conversation?
She just slapped the clapper.
All right, so I want to thank the audience for taking the time out of their schedule to watch and listen to us and give us, you know, some very good questions. This is being recorded, so thank you for registering. You're going to get a copy of this recording. Feel free to tell your friends and family about this stuff. You have to have these conversations. They're very difficult conversations that they don't have to be. You can start by having a question, the simple question, do we have a plan in case something happens? Start the conversation from there. And then the next step is talk to the professionals and create a plan for yourself.
And if you have any questions about real estate or anything, give Dean, Evans, or Tashana a call because they're the experts at doing that. So we're here to help you. If you have any kind of thing with estate planning, elder law, Medicaid, probate, any of those things, we can certainly help you.
All right, so you guys want to give your contact information, how they can reach you? Andrew, Tiff?
We're at the Estate Planning and Elder Law Group. Our telephone number is 718-514-2066, and I'm sure Tiffany is madly typing away right now. You'll get that. And you can get us at info@epelg.com. That stands for the Estate Planning and Elder Law Group.
All right,
So-
Mr. Graber,
You can call me on my cell phone anytime, 516-527-9549. Or my email is my name, Dean Graber @kw.com. Facebook, my name, you'll find me.
Mr. Shana,
And my number is 347-358-4822. My email is shanamanram@gmail.com.
and I am Evan Saint-Gerard. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, pretty much just type in my full name, which is Evans, EVANTZ, SAINTGERARD. And my phone number, my cell phone is 917-975-5985. Again, thank you so much for watching this. If you have any questions about anything, the first step you have to do is have the conversation. Have the conversation with your family members, have the conversation with your spouse, everybody. Have the conversation with all your loved ones, and then you have the next conversation with the professionals. So hopefully it's us that can help you create a plan for you and your family for the next step.
Prevention is better than cure.
Tiff, you got the last words.
Yay, that's me. Okay. So I just wanted to let you know, beautiful people, all you wonderful attendees, make sure to pay attention to a survey popping up at the conclusion of this. That is also a great opportunity to express if you want to be reached out to, if you have some things that are outstanding and you just need some advice, or if you're looking forward to working with us because you see our expertise in what we do. We have some amazing real estate brokers on this line, pros, years and years of experience, as well as Andrew DeLoza, the estate planning and elder law firm, amazing attorney. So we would love to get to know you. Please fill out those surveys and make sure you give us all 5s.